It was just a simple ride home, but in the quiet of that car, a single touch and an unspoken look changed everything I thought I knew. It was late in the evening when the small gathering finally wound down. My best friend, her husband, had left earlier than planned, called away by some urgent matter at work. That left me, standing in the doorway with my jacket in hand, when she glanced at me with a polite but weary smile. She had that look of someone carrying the weight of the night, graceful but tired, her shoulders softening as the last guest closed the door behind them. "Looks like it's just us now," I said, trying to sound casual. She gave a light laugh, though there was a trace of hesitation in her eyes. "Yes. Though I suppose I'll have to find a way home soon." The words slipped out before I could second-guess myself. "Let me drive you. It's late, and you shouldn't be out there alone." For a moment she paused. I could almost hear her weighing the choice, whether it would seem improper, whether it might be easier to decline. But then she nodded, her voice gentle. "Thank you. That would mean a lot." The night air was crisp when we stepped outside. The streetlights flickered against the empty road, and I opened the passenger door for her. She moved with quiet elegance, sliding into the seat, her perfume drifting softly into the car, warm, floral, and somehow comforting. As I settled into the driver's seat, there was a silence between us, not awkward but charged with something I couldn't name. The engine hummed to life, and soon we were rolling down the quiet streets, the headlights carving a narrow path through the dark. At first, we spoke about simple things. The party, how quickly the night had gone, little jokes that made her laugh softly. But even in those light exchanges, I noticed the way her voice seemed to linger in the air, the way she turned slightly toward me as if she wanted me to really hear her. I tried not to stare, but my eyes kept catching the details. The way her hand rested lightly against the window, her fingers tapping an absent rhythm. The tired curve of her smile that still carried grace. And those fleeting moments when the streetlights illuminated her face, showing me a softness that words could never quite capture. The quiet of the ride felt different than other silences I'd known. It wasn't empty. It was full, brimming with the kind of awareness that comes when two people realize they're sharing a moment that could mean more than it should. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, but inside, my thoughts drifted. I told myself I was only being kind, only offering a ride. But as the distance between us shrank, I couldn't ignore the truth. Something was shifting, quietly, in the space between her and me. And though nothing had been said outright, I knew this night was already leading us toward something neither of us had expected. The night air carried with it a strange silence as Emma stepped into Daniel's car. What was supposed to be a casual favor, a ride home from her husband's best friend, suddenly felt heavier than it should. The hum of the engine filled the quiet, yet beneath that low vibration lingered unspoken thoughts neither dared to voice. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, his jaw tense, eyes focused straight ahead. Emma noticed, and though she tried to dismiss the flicker of awareness, it lingered like a shadow in the corner of her mind. At first, the drive was filled with small talk. Daniel asked about her day, about her plans for the weekend, and she answered politely, though both could feel the edge beneath their words. The night had stretched on longer than expected, and they were both tired, but fatigue wasn't the only thing weighing them down. The atmosphere inside that car felt charged, as if the universe itself had conspired to put them in a space too small to contain all the emotions pressing to escape. Emma shifted in her seat, her eyes drifting to the world outside. Streetlights flickered by in a rhythm, each one briefly illuminating her reflection in the glass before swallowing her back into darkness. It was in those moments of half-light and shadow that she wondered, why did she feel a pulse of energy sitting next to Daniel? He was her husband's best friend, someone she had known for years, familiar, safe, and yet, tonight he didn't feel safe at all. He felt dangerous in a way she couldn't explain. Daniel, on the other hand, fought his own war in silence. Every glance at Emma made his chest tighten. Every smile she gave, however polite, struck him deeper than he wanted to admit. He had always respected boundaries, always stayed loyal to his friend. But driving Emma home felt like temptation itself was riding shotgun, whispering in his ear, daring him to break the rules he had lived by for so long. Then came the moment neither expected. A sudden rain began to fall, soft at first, then pouring heavily against the windshield. Daniel flicked on the wipers, but the storm slowed them down, forcing him to pull over for safety. They sat there, the world outside drowning in water, while inside the car a silence fell so thick it seemed to echo louder than words. Emma turned to him, her eyes meeting his, and something in that gaze refused to look away. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. But it was undeniable. In that instant, without touching, without speaking, both of them knew the line between loyalty and betrayal had blurred. The drive home, meant to be simple and uneventful, had turned into the beginning of a storm that neither of them would escape untouched. And as Daniel restarted the engine, continuing the journey, the real danger began. Not on the road ahead, but in the pull between them that only grew stronger with every mile. By the time they reached Emma's house, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The headlights washed over the driveway, cutting through the mist before fading into the dark. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the engine was the only sound between them, a thin thread holding back the silence that felt like it could crush them both. Emma's hand hovered near the door handle, but she didn't open it. Something kept her rooted there, something unsaid, but far louder than words. Daniel finally broke the silence. His voice was low, strained, as though he'd been fighting himself for miles. "Emma? Can I tell you something?" Her breath caught in her chest. She nodded, though her heart pounded against her ribs like it was begging her to run. "I shouldn't say this," he continued, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. "But I can't keep pretending anymore. I've tried to bury it, to ignore it, but tonight, being this close, I can't." Emma turned slowly to face him, her pulse rushing in her ears. She should have stopped him. She should have reminded him of loyalty, of her husband, of the lines that must never be crossed. But instead, she stayed quiet, her silence an invitation for him to go on. "I have feelings for you," Daniel confessed, the words spilling out with a weight that left him breathless. "I know it's wrong. I know he's my best friend. But every time I see you, every time you smile, it feels like I'm drowning, Emma. And tonight, sitting here, I can't keep lying to myself." Her chest tightened. A wave of emotions crashed over her. Shock, guilt, anger, and something far more dangerous. The faint spark of desire she had been trying to ignore. She wanted to say it wasn't true, that he was imagining things. She wanted to tell him to stop, to take it all back. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Instead, she whispered, "Daniel." Just his name, but the way she said it carried more meaning than she intended. His eyes met hers, searching, pleading, as though waiting for her to condemn him or save him. The tension in that small car thickened, turning the air heavy, suffocating. She could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on her, the image of her husband flashing in her mind. And yet, alongside the guilt, another thought slipped in. A thought she shouldn't have allowed. What if? Emma finally tore her gaze away, fumbling with the handle to step out of the car. The cold drizzle kissed her skin, grounding her back into reality. But even as she walked up the path to her front door, her legs shaky, her mind was still trapped in the car. In his words, in the storm of emotions that refused to leave her. That night, as she lay in bed beside her husband, she knew everything had changed. Daniel's confession wasn't just words. It was a seed planted deep inside her heart, one that would grow, twist, and reshape the course of all their lives. The days after Daniel's confession unfolded like a quiet storm, nothing visible on the surface. Yet everything inside Emma's chest felt unsettled, restless. The world around her moved on as if nothing had happened. Her husband laughed at the dinner table, neighbors waved from across the street, and work demanded her attention. But Emma's mind replayed that night in the car again and again, each detail sharper than the last. The worst part was how normal Daniel acted when he came around. He was still the same dependable friend, still greeting her husband with firm handshakes, still flashing polite smiles at her in passing. But Emma knew better. Beneath those smiles hid the words he couldn't take back. And every time their eyes met, she felt it, the silent weight of everything unspoken. One evening, Emma found herself in the kitchen, preparing tea while her husband and Daniel talked in the living room. Their voices floated toward her, casual and steady, but her hands trembled as she poured the hot water into cups. The steam rose, curling upward like smoke from a fire she couldn't extinguish. She tried to focus on the mundane. 2 sugars in 1 cup, honey in the other, but her mind betrayed her. She remembered the way Daniel's voice had cracked when he said he couldn't keep pretending. When she carried the tray into the living room, her husband smiled at her, reaching out for his cup. Daniel's gaze lingered just a second too long, just enough to set her heartbeat racing. She quickly looked away, sinking into the chair beside her husband, silently begging her face not to betray her. The small talk went on, about sports, about work, about the weather, but Emma barely heard it. Her awareness narrowed to every subtle movement. The way Daniel's knee brushed against the coffee table, the way his fingers tapped restlessly against the cup, the way he stole glances at her when her husband wasn't looking. Later that night, after Daniel had gone, Emma sat alone in the dim glow of the lamp. Her husband had already gone upstairs to bed, but she stayed, curled on the sofa, staring at the untouched cup Daniel had left behind. The faint outline of his lips still clung to the rim, and the sight sent a strange ache through her chest. She scolded herself for even noticing, for letting something so small feel so significant. The silence of the house pressed in on her. She closed her eyes, willing her thoughts to quiet, but the memory of Daniel's confession came rushing back like a tide she couldn't hold back. His words weren't just in her head anymore. They were under her skin, in her breath, in the hollow spaces of her heart that longed for something she hadn't admitted she was missing. That night, as she finally climbed into bed beside her husband, Emma realized she was no longer the same woman she had been before that car ride. The air between her and Daniel had changed, and though they hadn't spoken of it again, silence itself had become their most dangerous language. The days had stretched into weeks, but the tension between Emma and Daniel refused to fade. Instead, it grew thicker, more suffocating, weaving itself into the spaces of their daily lives. Emma tried to anchor herself in routine. Morning coffee, errands, dinner with her husband, but Daniel's presence hovered at the edges like a shadow. The breaking point came unexpectedly, not in some grand or dramatic setting, but on a quiet afternoon when Emma found herself alone at the grocery store. She was halfway through the produce aisle when she heard a voice behind her. Steady, familiar, undeniably his. Emma. She froze, her hand tightening around the handle of her basket. When she turned, Daniel stood there, his expression calm but his eyes carrying a weight she knew all too well. They exchanged polite words at first, questions about her husband, about the weather, about mundane things neither of them really cared about. But the air between them told a different story. Every glance lingered. Every pause seemed to carry the unsaid. Emma reached for a bundle of apples, but her hand trembled slightly, and Daniel noticed. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you," he said. Her throat tightened. "You didn't. It's just—" She stopped, unable to finish. The silence that followed was unbearable. The store aisle around them bustled with shoppers, but Emma felt as though she and Daniel were in their own suspended world, cut off from everyone else. Finally, he broke the stillness. "Emma, I can't pretend that nothing happened. That night in the car, I meant every word." His tone was firm, but there was vulnerability there too, a rawness she hadn't expected. Her chest ached. She wanted to tell him to stop, to let it go, to erase it from existence. But her body betrayed her resolve. Her fingers loosened their grip on the basket, and she looked at him, really looked, and the wall she had been holding up cracked. "I know," she whispered. It was all she could manage, but it was enough. The words hung between them, fragile yet powerful, a confession in itself. They didn't touch, not yet, but the nearness was its own intimacy. Daniel's hand hovered near hers as though drawn by gravity, and for one reckless second, Emma thought she might reach back. But then the sound of a child's laughter echoed from the next aisle, snapping the moment in half. She pulled her hand back, clutching the basket as if it were her lifeline. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't push further. Instead, he gave her a look, one that spoke of longing, frustration, and resignation all at once, before stepping back. That night, Emma sat in her car outside her own house, hands gripping the steering wheel long after the engine was off. She knew she had reached a line she couldn't keep tiptoeing around. Whatever lay ahead, the fragile balance was broken. The silence was no longer safe. Something had shifted, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. Emma had convinced herself that distance was the solution. If she avoided Daniel, if she never allowed herself to be caught alone with him again, then maybe the aching storm inside her chest would quiet down. For a few days she managed. She busied herself with errands, stayed close to her husband, and limited her interactions to polite, careful exchanges. But fate, it seemed, was less forgiving. It was late one evening when her husband called to say he would be staying overnight at a work site. Emma accepted it calmly, masking her disappointment, though deep inside she dreaded the emptiness of the house. She was rinsing dishes when the doorbell rang. Wiping her hands on a towel, she opened the door and froze. Daniel stood there, a hesitant smile on his face. "Your husband asked me to drop off some papers for you," he explained, holding up an envelope. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, as if he, too, knew the danger of this moment. Emma's pulse quickened. She could have taken the envelope at the door, closed it, and ended the evening before it began. But something stopped her. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the storm of emotions she had tried so hard to bury. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house was unusually quiet, and Daniel noticed it immediately. "He's not home?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "Work trip." She tried to sound offhand, but her voice came out softer than intended. They sat in the living room, the envelope forgotten on the coffee table. Small talk filled the air, light, nervous words about trivial things, but beneath it simmered a silence more powerful than anything they said aloud. Emma found herself watching the way Daniel's hands rested on his knees, the way his voice lowered when he spoke directly to her, the way his presence filled the room in a way she hadn't let herself acknowledge before. At one point, she rose to pour them both some tea. As she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. Just a fleeting contact, but enough to ignite something inside her. She drew in a sharp breath, and when their eyes met, there was no disguising it anymore. The tension cracked. Daniel set the cup aside and leaned forward slightly, as if asking permission without words. Emma's body trembled. Not with fear, but with a mix of anticipation and dread. She didn't move away. She couldn't. Instead, she whispered, "This is wrong," though her voice lacked conviction. Daniel's answer came not in words, but in the gentle way his hand reached across the space between them, resting over hers. His touch was warm, steady, grounding. For a long moment, they stayed that way, hands joined, breaths shallow, as if the entire world had narrowed to this fragile connection. Emma closed her eyes, overwhelmed. When Daniel finally leaned closer, it wasn't reckless or demanding. It was slow, hesitant, almost reverent. His forehead touched hers first, a silent promise, a question left hanging in the air. And in that closeness, Emma felt the truth she had been denying, a longing she could no longer contain. They didn't need to say it. The line had been crossed, and both of them knew it. The air in the living room was heavy, as if it bore witness to what had just passed between Emma and Daniel. Their hands still rested together, warm and unmoving, the silence stretching long enough to feel eternal. For the first time in weeks, there were no more veils, no more polite small talk to hide behind. The truth was alive between them, dangerous, undeniable, and painfully human. Emma was the first to pull back. She rose abruptly, walking a few steps toward the window, clutching her arms around herself as though she could shield her heart from the weight of her choices. "This isn't fair," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not to him. Not to us. Daniel stood slowly, careful not to crowd her. His voice was low, but steady. I know. But pretending we don't feel this hasn't stopped it, has it? Her shoulders tightened. He was right, and that truth frightened her more than anything. She turned to face him, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Daniel, if this goes any further, we lose everything. My marriage, your friendship with him, the life we both know. Is that what you want? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the distance between them until only a breath separated them. His gaze softened, filled not with reckless desire but with an aching tenderness. What I want doesn't matter if it destroys you, he said finally. I'd rather carry this in silence than watch you break. The words struck deep, unraveling something inside Emma. She hadn't expected selflessness, not from a man caught in such a tangled web of longing, but his restraint, his willingness to put her peace above his own desire, pierced her more deeply than any confession. Tears welled up, slipping down her cheeks. And in that moment, Daniel did the only thing he could. He reached out, gently brushing them away with his thumb. The touch was tender, reverent, a goodbye wrapped in an embrace. Emma leaned into it, allowing herself one final moment of closeness. His hand lingered against her cheek, and she closed her eyes, memorizing the warmth, the steadiness, the silent comfort he offered. Then, with a shuddering breath, she stepped back. The distance felt like tearing away a piece of herself, but she knew it was necessary. We can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. Not like this. Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening as though the effort cost him. I know. The rest of the night unfolded quietly. He left without another word, only a long, searching look at the doorway that spoke everything neither of them could say aloud. Emma closed the door gently behind him, her heart pounding in the hollow silence that followed. Later, lying awake beside her sleeping husband, Emma stared into the darkness. She knew nothing could erase what had happened, nor the emotions that had surfaced. But she also knew she had made a choice, a painful, imperfect choice, to protect the life she still held dear. And somewhere deep inside, she carried the bittersweet truth. Sometimes love is not about claiming, but about letting go. Their story would not be spoken, not written in vows or sealed in kisses, but it would live quietly in the space between their hearts, a memory that changed them both forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more true love and affair dramas, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice makes these stories come alive.